Hey guys, it's Saga and this is the video you guys have been waiting for. In this one, I'll be putting the cameras on this Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus against the ones on its younger brother, the Redmi Note 12 Pro. There is a 5000 rupees difference between the price of both these phones, and their main camera is one of the main differentiator, so we are going to focus the most on that one. Now as soon as anyone hears about there being a 200 megapixel camera on a phone, their first question is, do we really need all these megapixels, or is a 50 or 64 megapixel camera good enough for a smartphone? That is exactly what we are going to try and find out in this video. I have a lot of image and video samples to show you guys, and I would like to get to them as soon as possible, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time talking about the camera specs. All you need to know before we begin is that the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus comes with a 200 megapixel Samsung HPX sensor, whereas the Redmi Note 12 Pro comes with a 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 sensor. Both of them get OIS on these cameras. The other two cameras are same on both the phones, the 8 megapixel ultra wide camera and a 2 megapixel macro one. Both of them also get the same 16 megapixel front facing camera. With all of that out of the way, let us begin with the image and video samples. Since we are looking to compare 200 megapixel sensor with a 50 megapixel one, let us begin by comparing the high resolution images first. These are 12 megapixel bind shots from both the phones, which are still incredibly detailed, but from this far they both seem to have the same amount of details in them. Now when we switch to the 200 megapixel mode on the 12 Pro Plus and 50 megapixel mode on the 12 Pro, you actually still won't see any difference between them from so far. To see even a slightest difference between both these images, we will have to zoom in 7 to 8 times on each of them. And once we do, we will start noticing more details and sharper things in the 200 megapixel shot from the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus. Not just that, but the noise level in the 50 megapixel shot is also much higher than the 200 megapixel one. Here is another set of high resolution images in very brightly lit conditions. We don't see as much noise in either of these images. But frankly, I feel it is ridiculous that we have to zoom in so far to see any difference between the 50 and 200 megapixel shot. Yes, the 200 megapixel shots are more detailed and you can actually keep on zooming in on them even further. But wait and think for this for a moment. When do we really zoom in so far in our images, and that too on a smartphone's display? I don't think anyone does this very often. On top of that, these 200 megapixel shots are also 4 to 5 times bigger in terms of storage space compared to the 50 megapixel ones, which are already 3 to 4 times larger than the pixel binned 12 megapixel ones. Redmi understands this, so they have also given us a 50 megapixel mode on this 12 Pro Plus. It uses 4:1 pixel binning to achieve this, and here are how those 50 megapixel shots compare against the 50 megapixel ones from the Note 12 Pro. Again, you will notice no difference between these images from so far, and even when I zoom in 4 times, they still seem to have the same amount of details in them. Before I zoom in any further, let us take a moment to appreciate the amount of details that both of these phones have captured so far. It is only when we start to zoom in over 6 times, we start seeing ones from the Note 12 Pro Plus to be slightly more detailed. So yes, again for these 50 megapixel shots, the ones from the Note 12 Pro Plus seem to have more details, but only when you compare these images side by side and look at them under a magnifying glass. Otherwise, I would say both these images look almost the same. I feel the 50 megapixel sensor on the Note 12 Pro captures plenty of details, and it should be enough for majority of the people out there. I am not saying that the 200 megapixel images are bad or you should not go with it. But in real life, no matter how close you look, you will barely notice the difference that the extra 150 megapixel images are going to make. One might argue that they will need the extra megapixels if they want to crop in on a certain part of the image later on. And they would be right. But how often will you be doing that? If you plan on cropping too deep on each and every image that you take, then and only then the 200 megapixels might be justified. For anyone else, I would say the 50 megapixel sensor on the Note 12 Pro is more than enough, and even if you go with the Note 12 Pro Plus, I would suggest to take your high resolution shots at 50 megapixels instead of the full 200 megapixel resolution. Your phone's internal storage will thank you later on. For almost all of my shots, I like to stick to the default 12 megapixel mode on both these phones. Sticking to this resolution also ensures that you will be getting the best looking colors and dynamic range out of these sensors. Look at how good and detailed these 12 megapixel shots look. You can even zoom in 2 to 3 times and these images still won't fall apart. So my suggestion would be to stick to the default 12 megapixel mode for all of your daily shots and only switch to the high resolution mode when you are trying to capture some landscape or architecture, that too in bright daylight. Alright, all the images from the main cameras of both these phones that we see from this point ahead are 12 megapixel binned ones. Detail wise, both these phones do a similar job, but you do see a difference between both these images. It is a small difference, but out of the two, the Note 12 Pro Plus has slightly more contrast in its images. I actually like that, and I feel that this gives its images a bit more depth. Another difference is, I took these images during a sunny day, and the Note 12 Pro Plus doesn't seem to have captured that warmth in its images. For some reason, it tries to cool the shot down, whereas the regular 12 Pro did well with this. You can see its images being a bit warmer And that is actually how the color temperature of the scene really was. We see this in indoor daytime shots as well. This scene had a bit warmer tones in it, and the Note 12 Pro has done well to show that in its image, whereas the 12 Pro Plus made the overall shot look a couple of shades cooler. It is surprising to see a difference in the way both these phones process colors. Both of them have the same Dimensity 1080 chip with the same ISP, and I am also sure that Redmi is putting both these images through the exact same image processing pipeline. So I guess the image sensor that they use are causing the difference in the colors that we see. As I mentioned before, Note 12 Pro Plus gets a Samsung HPX sensor, and the Note 12 Pro comes with a Sony IMX766 sensor, and my guess is that could be the only differentiating factor. So if you're looking to capture the most natural looking color temperature and white balance in your images, then you should be looking towards the regular Note 12 Pro. 12 Pro Plus is not capturing bad looking colors, it is just not the most accurate one. The warmer looking shots on the Note 12 Pro have a natural and calming feel to them. Well, this is just what I feel, and I am aware that everyone perceives color in a different way, so which of these images you like will depend on your personal preference. Coming to the dynamic range, make sure to put both these cameras in the auto HDR mode, as by default it is turned off. Now this shot has tricky situation where the sun is right behind the building, but both the phones seem to have done a good enough job of bringing up a lot of details from the shadows. It seems like the building is a bit sharper in the Note 12 Pro Plus's shot, but the colors are better in the Note 12 Pro's image. In this next one, the Note 12 Pro has brought up more details in the shadows, while the other one again made the colors look a bit bluer. If you checked out their launch event, Redmi has made a fuss about the lens flare in other phones' images, and how they have used some expensive coating on the main camera of the Note 12 Pro Plus, so you won't be seeing that in its images. And after all of that talk, you can still see lens flares in the Note 12 Pro Plus's images. In this next set, both the phones took a different approach. Pro Plus tried to manage the highlights so the overall shot is a bit darker, but the sun is not as blown out. 12 Pro however tried to bring the shadows up, and in this process, the sun got a bit too bright in its image. In this one, we again see the Pro Plus did much better with the brighter sky and the sun, while the 12 Pro did better with the shadows blowing up the sun and sky. This image from the Pro Plus is a bit too dark, whereas Note 12 Pro brought up more information from the shadows, making its image look a bit better. So even after all these images, we can see a clear overall winner in terms of dynamic range. One of them does better in some of the situations, while the other one does better in the next few shots. So I guess we can call the HDR shots between both a tie. That being said, I feel like both the phones can use a few improvements in the HDR department via software updates. Both the phones are good at taking close-up shots. Focusing is fast on both of them, but the Note 12 Pro Plus is a bit more accurate. For some of these close-up shots, the regular 12 Pro took a lot of attempts to set the focus properly. But once the focus was set, the images turned out to be this good. Minimum focusing distance on the 12 Pro is slightly better than the 12 Pro Plus. From a same distance, more of the subject is in focus from the 12 Pro's camera, while only a small portion of the subject is in sharp focus in the image from the 12 Pro Plus. For the complete subject to be in sharp focus, you might have to move a couple of centimeters away from it on the 12 Pro Plus. That being said, thanks to the bigger sensor and wide aperture, the background in these close-up shots have a very nice and natural looking bokeh. For close-ups, I would say the 12 Pro Plus is a hair better. Both the phones get the exact same macro camera, and I'm really not a fan of these shots from either of these phones, so I'm just not going to talk about these cameras at all. I just feel like companies need to stop this nonsense of including a really bad macro camera just for the sake of increasing the number of cameras on their phone's back. The wide camera is also same on both the phones, but thankfully it is not as bad as the macro one. It actually takes some really good looking images if you give them a lot of light. We saw this building from the main camera before, and if you remember, this is how much of it the main camera on both the phones captured. And once you switch to the wide lens, it will let you get the entire building in the shot to show the actual scale of it. This wide lens lets us see the same scene with a very different perspective. We again saw this scene with the main camera and it only showed us the building. But switching to the wide lens lets me show you how the scene around the building was. You can also see the road in front of it and the colored wall opposite this building. All of which was just not possible to capture in a single shot from the main camera. As good as these images look, they are being captured by an 8 megapixel sensor. So we obviously don't see as many details in them as we see in the images from the main camera. You will also see a lot more noise in the darker parts of the scene and a bit of distortion towards the edges of the frame in these shots. I feel like these wide shots are almost similar from both the phones, so this portion of this comparison again ends in a tie. Now we come to one of my favorite parts of shooting images on any smartphone, the portrait mode. Both the phones are quick at detecting the edges of your subject, but they are not the most accurate at it. Skin tones and overall colors in these portrait shots look really good, and I appreciate Redmi for getting this right, because most of the phones in this price range don't really work on getting this part right. But the edge detection is not that accurate, which makes some of these images look very unnatural. If you have a busy background behind your subject, instead of a soft and gradual blur roll-off, you could see a hard line separating your subject from the background, which doesn't really look all that good. In some of the shots, we also see both the phones missing to blur some parts of the background, like the portion between the left arm and body in this case. Note 12 Pro even blurred the hair in this shot, while the 12 Pro Plus did a slightly better job. If you are taking portrait shots and your subject is in front of a bright background, like in this shot, the phone will try to prioritize the face and make it look bright, and I think the HDR mode is inactive while taking portrait shots on both the phones, so the background will be completely blown out. This is the same on both the phones, and it happens every time you have a bright background behind your subject, so be very careful about it. I think I've been very critical about the portrait mode on both these phones in their individual camera reviews. But if you are a bit patient and if the lighting conditions are right, and if you take some time to compose your shot in the right way, the portrait shots from both the phones can actually end up looking really good. Yes, Redmi still needs to work on getting the edge detection right via updates, but you can still take some really good portrait shots with both the phones even now. Both again do a similar job with the portraits of objects. In other than a couple of very specific conditions, I don't feel like one of these phones is much better than the other while taking portrait shots, so it is again a tie. So far, it is looking like the 50 megapixel main sensor on the Note 12 Pro is doing really well and holding itself right next to the 200 megapixel one on the Note 12 Pro Plus. But now we are going to get into artificial and lower lighting conditions and check if we see any differences there. Both the phones have big sensors, wide aperture and OIS, so both of them take very good looking, almost noise-free images when there is plenty of ambient light around, like in these shots. It's not just these two, but I feel like most of the phones in this price range have got really good at capturing images in artificial light. Since a 200 megapixel sensor on the 12 Pro Plus is slightly bigger and it also gets a hair wider aperture, we see a tad bit more sharpness and details in its images. But you won't notice this unless you zoom in a bit on these shots and compare them side by side. While the difference in details might not be easily noticed without zooming in, the way both these phones handles the brighter lights is very easily visible. Note 12 Pro did a fairly good job with the overall image, but it blew away the light bulbs, whereas the 12 Pro Plus handled the exposure really well and it even lets us see the filaments of these bulbs. Now don't get me wrong, the images from the Note 12 Pro also look good on their own, and unless we put them up besides the ones from the Note 12 Pro Plus, we won't be able to tell that these are having a bit less details or that the exposure could have been handled in a slightly better way. So if you shoot most of your images in well-lit artificial light, you can still go with the Note 12 Pro and not worry too much about it. In this next shot, again the 12 Pro Plus tried to make the light appear cooler like it did during the daytime, but the 12 Pro has captured the actual colors of the light in this lobby. Things get a bit more interesting when we get to even lower light. Both the images might look pretty similar from this far, but as I zoom in, we see that the 12 Pro has added some sharpness to its images, which makes them look more detailed than the ones from the 12 Pro Plus. I am not a fan of this since it also brings up the noise in the darker parts of the shot. It did the same in this set of image, but here the 12 Pro Plus actually captured the true colors of the flowers, whereas the 12 Pro made them look a bit desaturated and dull. By default, both these phones have the auto night mode option turned on in the settings, but I turned it off for this comparison because I like to make that choice myself. Once the light got even lower, I eventually switched to the night mode, and here we start seeing the Note 12 Pro Plus taking better and sharper looking images than the Note 12 Pro. It also took very little time to capture these night mode shots, whereas the regular 12 Pro took at least 2 seconds or even longer to capture each of these images. There was a lot of haze while I took these shots, and without the night mode, both the phones didn't do all that well with the brighter light. But with the night mode turned on, they handled it in a much better way. With the night mode turned on, I think the 12 Pro Plus captures better looking colors. It keeps the warmer lights looking warm and also makes sure to retain the other colors in the shot. I'm not a fan of taking night mode images because they take too long to capture, and even if the phone has a big sensor, wide aperture and OIS, chances are many of your night mode shots will end up looking blurry. I also know for a fact that most people don't have the patience to hold the phone steady even for 1 second for taking these night mode shots. But this is a comparison video and I have to let you guys know which one is better. So if I was making the choice between these two, I would go with the 12 Pro Plus for taking night mode shots. The wide lens on both the phones get night mode as well, but even with it turned on, these images don't look all that impressive. I would suggest you to stick to the main camera for all of your shots after the sun goes down, as that one will give you the best possible images. That brings us to the front-facing cameras. Again, both the phones have the exact same selfie camera, and these images are being put through the same image processing pipeline, so we see very little difference between both of them. One thing to note, the beauty or skin smoothing mode is turned on by default on both the phones, so if you don't like that, or if you prefer sharper selfies, make sure to turn that mode off. And also keep in mind to turn on the HDR mode every time you want to take a selfie. For some reason, it is always turned off by default. The sharpness in these selfies is not an issue as I feel they have enough details in them. but the skin tones appear a bit too pale in all of these shots and the overall colors also look a bit desaturated. If Redmi could fix these two things, I feel like most people will enjoy taking selfies with these phones. The edge detection gets slightly better while taking portrait selfies. Actually, it is much better than the edge detection from the rear cameras on both these phones. Again, make sure to turn off the beauty mode if you don't like it, as it is on by default. And skin tones and colors again look a bit off in these portrait selfies. We had very bright looking colors in this shot, but both the cameras failed to capture the true colors. So again, I hope Redmi is aware of this and hopefully they have people working on getting this better. Here's a video from the front facing camera of the Redmi Note 12 Pro and the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus. You can see how both these phones are handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure and stabilization when I am walking around with them. Both of them can shoot at a maximum resolution of 1080p 60fps and this video has been shot at 1080p 30fps. Both these phones can shoot 4K 30fps videos with their main rear cameras. There is no electronic stabilization at this resolution, but thankfully OIS is working on both, so these videos don't look horribly shaky like from some of the other phones in this price range. If you have steady hands and if you are careful with your steps, then these 4K videos end up looking really good and smooth. If you want OIS and EIS to work together, you will have to switch to 1080p 30fps mode. These videos are very stable, but they are nowhere as detailed as the 4K ones. You can shoot 1080p 60fps videos as well, but for some reason OIS just doesn't work with this resolution and frame rate option. These phones can take really good 4K videos for their price, and I feel you can even use them for some light vlogging. So video wise, both these phones are very evenly matched. With that, we have seen over 165 image and video samples from both these phones combined, and I think it is safe to say that the difference between their images is not as big as the difference between their prices. Yes, the 200 megapixel camera on the 12 Pro Plus sounds like a big deal, and it does capture more details in the high resolution mode. But unless you are planning on zooming in 700 to 800 times on each of your shots, those extra details end up making no difference at all. The night mode shots are also slightly better from the Note 12 Pro Plus, and somehow it also manages to show better looking colors with the night mode turned on. But the difference is not that drastic, definitely not worth the 5000 rupees. Rest of the images, like the ones I took in artificial light and from the front facing cameras, are pretty much similar from both. And during daytime, we already saw that the regular Note 12 Pro captures more accurate color temperature and white balance than the 12 Pro Plus. So the answer to the question that do you really need a 200 megapixel sensor on your phone is I don't really think so. The 50 megapixel one on the Note 12 Pro seems to be doing an equally good job. I'm not saying that the Note 12 Pro Plus has a bad set of cameras. In fact, if you know that you are going to crop in heavily on all of your shots, then it would be better to go with it and shoot most of your images in the full 200 megapixel resolution. But the 5000 rupees price difference between these two doesn't really translate all that well to their images. So the regular Redmi Note 12 Pro with its 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 sensor might just provide you better value for your money. Well, that is what I think. I hope you guys found this video to be helpful in some way or the other. These were my thoughts after taking and comparing all these images. But you guys saw these images too, so what do you guys have to say about these cameras? And if you are looking to get one of these phones, which one would you go with? Let me know in the comments. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.